"That car is worth more than your life," the man declared, loud enough for everyone around to hear. His companions laughed, sipping their expensive champagne. Jessica didn't flinch. She stood silently behind the velvet rope, hands casually tucked into the pockets of her simple hoodie, merely admiring the flawless, gleaming paint of the Rolls-Royce. She hadn't touched it, nor had she dared cross the barrier marked by the red velvet ropes. But in that moment, surrounded by wealthy men in tailored suits and luxury watches, her mere presence felt like an intolerable threat to someone who believed that power and human worth were measured solely by riches and appearances. Jessica Barnes, a celebrated black CEO in American business circles, had slipped into her own Sterling Auto dealership unnoticed. In a gray hoodie, neatly fitted jeans, and worn sneakers, she looked nothing like the polished executive the media portrayed. In her hand was a brown leather portfolio containing her prearranged financial documents. She'd come alone, no assistant, no bodyguard, intentionally blending in as an ordinary customer. Today wasn't about evaluating her staff. She simply wanted to experience firsthand the service at the dealership she'd worked so hard to build. That bright Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the showroom's glossy floors and impeccably detailed cars. To her left, the lineup of everyday models included a 2013 Toyota Corolla, the economical choice she intended to buy for daily driving. To her right, behind red velvet ropes, stood the Sterling Elite luxury line, featuring ultra-luxury vehicles like Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, and the awe-inspiring Bugatti Chiron. The ropes clearly separated regular patrons from the VIP guests invited to today's special event. Jessica paused, pride mingling with reflection. She remembered her early days in the auto industry, when skeptics doubted a black woman could lead. Yet she'd proven herself time and again, growing Sterling Auto from a modest lot into a nationally renowned chain. For that brief moment, she stood there, humble and composed, unrecognized as the powerful CEO who transformed this showroom into a symbol of success. Just then, the glass doors slid open again, and Richard Preston entered. His arrival drew every eye, staff and customers alike. Richard embodied American high society, a perfectly tailored navy blazer, crisp slacks, polished leather shoes, and a diamond-studded Rolex on his wrist. His hair was impeccably styled, and his confidence bordered on arrogance. Flanking him were two equally well-dressed men, each holding a freshly poured glass of champagne. He didn't need to introduce himself. His wealth and status spoke volumes in every deliberate movement, in the way he surveyed the room as if appraising each person. His cold gaze locked onto Jessica by the luxury display. Somehow, her plain, unassuming look offended him. From the very first second, Richard decided she didn't belong there. To him, a casually dressed black woman standing amidst million-dollar cars was beyond unacceptable. The atmosphere shifted from casual to charged in an instant. Salespeople exchanged worried glances. Some stepped forward, then hesitated under Richard's steely stare. Meanwhile, Jessica remained perfectly calm, ignoring his disdain. She stepped away from the VIP section and approached the desk where young salesperson Kevin Miller waited to help her finalize the paperwork for her Toyota purchase. The convergence of these two very different figures in the same space set the stage for the dramatic events to come. No one in the showroom could have imagined that Jessica Barnes, the unassuming black woman, would soon become the centerpiece of a story that would upend everyone's ideas about power, prestige, and respect. And no one foresaw that Richard Preston, with his arrogance and challenge, would soon face the most painful truth of his life. On one side stood superficial wealth built on arrogance and prejudice. On the other, true power forged by self-respect, perseverance, and dignity. The showdown between Jessica and Richard had only just begun, and it was about to crescendo into a story of high drama and profound lessons about human character and the real meaning of dignity and integrity. Jessica stood quietly, admiring the ultra-luxury cars at the special VIP exhibition, her gaze drifting gently yet thoughtfully over every minute detail. The mirror-like sheen of the Rolls-Royce Ghost reflected her humble figure so faithfully, stirring memories of the days when Jessica had to work harder than anyone else to conquer the prejudice and doubt surrounding her. She didn't tear her eyes away from that row of exquisite vehicles. In fact, it was precisely her calm composure that drew Richard's attention above all else. Not far away, Richard Preston had already noticed this unfamiliar presence in the space he'd always regarded as the exclusive domain of the elite. Every tiny detail about Jessica unsettled him. Richard's eyes narrowed as his cold stare fixed on the woman standing serenely in front of the luxury display, as though she had every right to be there. To Richard, her presence wasn't mere ignorance. It felt like an affront to his status and class. His nature, always dismissive of those he deemed beneath him, compelled him to act immediately, to re-establish the clear hierarchy in the showroom he considered his personal playground. Richard set his champagne glass down on a nearby table, straightened his blazer sleeve with slow deliberation. His two wealthy companions exchanged mocking chuckles, as if already savoring the scene to come. Then Richard strode toward Jessica, his confidence laced with challenge. "This area doesn't seem open to ordinary customers, does it?" he spoke, his voice carrying across the room. Sales staff and onlookers nearby turned at once, and a sudden hush fell over the showroom. All eyes shifted to Jessica. She remained composed as she turned toward him, meeting Richard's contemptuous gaze. In that look, she recognized something she'd faced countless times before: prejudice. Yet Jessica showed no sign of discomfort or anger. She offered him a polite, measured smile and replied, "I know exactly where I stand, but thank you for pointing it out." Her voice was soft, devoid of any anger. It was precisely this quiet dignity that left Richard astonished. In his mind, someone like Jessica should have been shamed into silence, cowering or fleeing in panic. But none of that happened. She merely inclined her head in a courteous nod, then calmly walked over to Kevin Miller's desk, where her purchase paperwork awaited. Richard froze, his expression shifting from haughty to plainly irritated. His companion's sneers faded as the atmosphere diverged sharply from their expectations. Richard had never encountered a situation like this. A woman he assumed inferior in every way, standing proud and unbowed. It felt like a direct blow to his inflated ego. He frowned slightly, tightening his grip on the champagne glass again. He felt challenged, subtly but unmistakably, and it was a challenge he couldn't accept. Having been raised in privilege and power, Richard believed that once he spoke, everyone would listen and submit. Yet Jessica not only refused to yield, she left him powerless to assert his authority. Curious eyes remained fixed on him, waiting to see his next move, and that only stoked his irritation further. He refused to become a joke in front of these people. Resolutely, he vowed that by any means necessary he would prove to everyone that Jessica did not belong here. He would make her understand her proper place in the world where he stood at the top. Meanwhile, Jessica sat serenely beside young Kevin, handing him her documents for review. Kevin glanced nervously at Richard's still piercing gaze, but Jessica offered him a reassuring smile. "It's okay. Please, carry on." Kevin nodded and returned to his work, though the tension spreading through the showroom was palpable. Some customers whispered among themselves, and the sales staff exchanged anxious looks. Richard remained standing there, his eyes ice cold, and his lips pressed into a tight line. He could not accept that a stranger like Jessica could appear and unsettle him in the territory he considered exclusively his own. That dissatisfaction hardened into a detailed plan in his mind, what he would do next to force her to bow. Jessica remained calm as if nothing had happened, but deep inside she knew her clash with Richard was only beginning. From this moment on, he would stop at nothing to humiliate her and drive her from the showroom in shame. Yet Jessica also knew she was ready, no longer the vulnerable woman she once was. And this was only the beginning. From the moment Jessica stepped away from the VIP section, Richard Preston couldn't take his eyes off her. His sharp gaze followed her every step with growing irritation, as if her calm composure were the greatest challenge to the pride he held so dear. Richard's companions noticed his rising anger and exchanged knowing smiles, encouraging him to act. After all, Richard had never been one to accept defeat lightly. Realizing he couldn't simply shame Jessica with words alone, Richard immediately conceived a subtler, more insidious plan. He would undermine her credibility indirectly, using the sales staff. People he assumed would eagerly side with a wealthy customer like himself. In his mind, a few pointed insinuations, a few vague accusations, would be enough to turn Jessica from an ordinary buyer into a suspicious figure in everyone's eyes. Leaning casually against the display, Richard raised his champagne glass to his lips, then lowered his voice just enough for the nearby salespeople to overhear. "I'm not sure why they're letting unfamiliar faces wander around today. I just saw that woman in the hoodie lingering by the Rolls-Royces for ages. Seems a bit odd, don't you think? Maybe you should keep an eye on her." His tone was polite, almost concerned, but his words were a sharp lance. The staff glanced immediately toward Jessica. Though nobody had seen her do anything wrong, suspicion from a customer as wealthy as Richard was more than enough to make them wary. Satisfied, Richard watched their reactions with a faint smile. To him, power wasn't just about wealth. It was about manipulating others, planting baseless doubts with finesse. He knew that once the staff felt even a hint of uncertainty, Jessica would start to feel the pressure, without him lifting another finger. Sure enough, the atmosphere shifted. As Jessica made her way back to Kevin Miller's desk, the salespeople skirted around her cautiously, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. Other customers began whispering among themselves, noting the sight of this unassuming woman who seemed out of place amid the luxury. Jessica noticed the change but remained composed, calmly completing her purchase paperwork with Kevin. Kevin, who had been cheerful and at ease moments before, now hesitated, aware of Richard's disapproving stare and the uneasy looks from his colleagues. Yet Jessica's gentle, respectful demeanor reassured him. "Miss Barnes, your financing has been approved," Kevin said softly, striving for normalcy. "We just need your signature to finalize the contract." Jessica nodded and smiled as she picked up the pen. She refused to let invisible pressure shake her poise. Still, she knew Richard wouldn't stop here. He stood not far away, his eyes full of resentment as he plotted his next move. True to form, Richard wasn't about to concede. He approached a young security guard, Mark Evans, stationed near the showroom entrance. With a grave expression, he leaned in. "Hey there. I think you should keep a closer watch on that woman over there. I'm not saying she's up to anything, but she's been circling those expensive cars in a strange way. This showroom is for high-end clients, right?" Mark, inexperienced and eager to please, nodded earnestly. Richard, pleased, turned back to watch Jessica, who had just signed the contract. Jessica stood and stretched lightly, fully aware of the tense gazes around her, but utterly unperturbed. She had faced situations like this countless times, and understood that true strength lay not in an angry rebuttal, but in steadfast dignity and self-respect. She caught Richard's eye for a brief moment and offered him a courteous nod, silently conveying, "I know exactly what you're doing, and I'm ready." Richard's brow furrowed, his hand tightening around his champagne glass. Jessica's serenity unnerved him once more. He realized his petty tactics had failed to rattle her. If he wanted to diminish her, he'd have to escalate. The showroom's tension was taut as a drawn bowstring. One more move from Richard, and everything would snap. Jessica remained calm, patiently awaiting his next challenge. For her, this battle wasn't just about personal honor, it was proof of the real power of dignity and self-worth. The moment Jessica's eyes left Richard and returned to the young salesperson Kevin, she immediately sensed something was off in the showroom. The staff around her were whispering among themselves, some discreetly glancing her way with looks of unease. Jessica recognized exactly what was happening. Richard Preston had begun leveraging his power and influence to steer the situation, making things even more uncomfortable for her. Richard didn't bother hiding his dissatisfaction at seeing Jessica remain calm and unshaken by the spiteful insinuations he'd planted. He raised a hand and motioned to a nearby receptionist. In a low, icy tone, he said clearly, "Please, have the store manager, Mr. Daniel Hartley, come out here immediately. I want to address the issue of that woman." The receptionist looked startled but nodded quickly, picking up the phone to call his office. Richard folded his arms, standing tall, his eyes boring into Jessica with a challenge. He knew that Daniel Hartley, the store manager, was always sensitive to pressure from wealthy customers and prioritized the dealership's bottom line above all else. Richard was confident Daniel would side with him without asking too many questions. Less than 2 minutes later, Daniel Hartley emerged from his office, looking tense and hurried. A middle-aged man who prided himself on his pristine white shirt, elegant dark tie, and polished leather shoes, Daniel had a reputation for handling VIP situations with efficiency and deference. "Mr. Preston, is there a problem?" Daniel asked, his eyes discreetly flicking toward Jessica as he assessed the scene. Richard leaned in slightly, lowering his voice but still loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "I'm quite bothered that you're allowing a strange woman, dressed inappropriately, to wander around the VIP area. It makes my friends and me very uncomfortable. We expect a more exclusive, secure environment for this special exhibition." Daniel immediately felt the weight of Richard's complaint. Without hesitation, he believed Richard's words. He knew a wealthy, powerful man like Richard could inflict serious reputational and financial damage if his concerns weren't addressed promptly. In that moment, Daniel didn't pause to consider that he might be perpetuating discrimination. He inhaled sharply and stepped toward Jessica, his usual courteous demeanor gone. His voice turned cold and dismissive as he said, "I'm sorry, but this area is reserved for invite-only VIPs. Please return to the general customer section to avoid inconveniencing our other guests." His words cut through the showroom's atmosphere like a frozen blade. Customers, sales staff, the receptionist, and even Richard turned to watch Jessica. Everyone waited for her reaction to the manager's direct order to leave. Jessica remained serene. She rose slowly and faced Daniel directly. Her eyes were calm but conveyed a quiet inner strength. In a clear, gentle tone that nonetheless carried across the showroom, she asked, "Mr. Hartley, I understand your position, but could you please explain what rule I've broken or what policy I've violated that requires me to leave?" Daniel looked taken aback by Jessica's poised confidence. He glanced toward Richard for support, but Richard merely offered a cold, mocking smile. unwilling to rescue him from the awkward moment. Clearing his throat, Daniel tried to sound firm, but faltered as uncertainty crept into his voice. I've received feedback from some important clients that you've been lingering too long by the expensive cars, making them feel unsafe and uncomfortable. We're just trying to ensure the best experience for our guests, so I hope you understand. Jessica gave a small, meaningful smile. I understand. But please consider this. I've simply been admiring these cars respectfully, without touching anything or bothering anyone. Is it really fair that the comfort of certain VIP customers should come at the expense of unjustly stripping rights from other guests? Her words struck Daniel dumb. An invisible weight pressed on his shoulders as everyone in the showroom listened intently. They realized Jessica's question was both perfectly reasonable and a direct challenge to the unfair way the situation had been handled. Richard stood at a distance, tightening his grip on his champagne glass, his face betraying disappointment that Daniel hadn't swiftly managed the situation as he'd hoped. Richard's anger surged. Jessica not only refused to back down but had openly exposed the injustice he was orchestrating. Jessica finished speaking, her gaze still locked on Daniel, unflinching. In that moment, everyone in the showroom felt the subtle but undeniable shift in power. More than anyone, Daniel knew he had just made a grave mistake by underestimating the woman standing before him. An awkward silence fell over the showroom after Jessica's exchange with Daniel Hartley. The tension felt as if it had frozen in place, and every eye fixed on the manager, who stood rooted to the spot in the vast room. Daniel tried to maintain a stern expression, but his eyes betrayed genuine confusion and discomfort. In that moment, Richard Preston, standing not far away, grew even more irritated, realizing his carefully laid plan might be unraveling in the face of Jessica's unshakable composure. Richard could no longer tolerate Jessica's calm confidence. To him, her poise was a direct provocation, an open challenge to his power and status in a public forum. That affront stoked his pride, compelling him to strike back more forcefully, consequences be damned. In his mind, a new, far more brazen scheme took shape. One outright slander would not suffice. Without a moment's hesitation, Richard strode up to Daniel and raised his voice deliberately so the entire showroom could hear. I really don't want to make a scene, Daniel, but clearly you're missing the point. That woman just climbed past the rope and deliberately touched the expensive Rolls-Royce Ghost over there. I saw it with my own eyes, and I'm certain the security cameras will back me up. Richard's false accusation struck the hushed showroom like lightning. Customers immediately buzzed with shock and curiosity. Salespeople and guards all turned to regard Jessica with renewed suspicion. Even though she'd done nothing wrong, the charge from a wealthy, influential man like Richard made them cautious. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He didn't pause to think it through. His only concern was the fallout if he didn't side with Richard. Under that crushing pressure, he reluctantly approached Jessica, his face taut with unease. Ms. Barnes, I'm sorry, but policy requires us to suspend this transaction and investigate this incident. Several clients have reported that you crossed the barrier and made unauthorized contact with the display car. Jessica met Daniel's gaze steadily. She knew he didn't truly believe Richard, but cowardice and the weight of money had forced his hand. In a calm but powerful tone, she replied, I did not cross any barrier, nor did I touch any vehicle. Feel free to review the security footage. I have nothing to hide. Daniel averted his eyes from her unwavering stare, then turned to the guard standing nearby, his voice trembling slightly. Please have security review the cameras immediately. And for safety, call the police to handle this matter. The showroom fell into an eerie, oppressive quiet. Young guard Mark Evans nodded and sprinted off toward the security room. Another receptionist hurriedly dialed for the police. Customers grew uneasy. Whispers and sideways glances spread as everyone took in the unexpected drama unfolding in this prestigious auto showroom. Richard folded his arms and allowed himself a cold, satisfied smile as he watched Jessica pushed onto the defensive. He was confident that even if the cameras cleared her, the sight of her being interrogated by police would shame her into silence and drive her away. To Richard, the only goal was to show everyone he was firmly in control, regardless of the truth. Minutes later, sirens wailed outside and 2 officers marched in, faces grim, heading straight for Jessica. A tall, short-haired officer spoke first. "We've received a report of suspicious behavior in the VIP area. Who is in charge here? Please explain the situation." Daniel stepped forward, his tension deepening, and reiterated Richard's accusation. The officer then turned to Jessica, his voice cool and formal. "Ma'am, we will review the security footage. In the meantime, please cooperate with us and refrain from causing any further disturbance." Jessica inclined her head and nodded, her calm undisturbed. She neither protested nor showed fear or anger. Her composure made the officer and everyone else subconsciously question the validity of Richard's claim. Richard, still standing his ground, felt a new unease as Jessica's serene dignity drew admiration from onlookers rather than censure. He hadn't anticipated that, even after orchestrating such a blatant falsehood, this unassuming woman could strip away his sense of control in the very domain he considered his own. The moment the 2 officers finished speaking, the air in the showroom grew more stifling than ever. Curious and wary, glances from every customer converged on Jessica like the harsh glare of stage spotlights. The oppressive silence made even the smallest sounds ring out. The heavy footfalls of the officers, the tense breaths of showroom manager Daniel Hartley. A short distance away, Richard Preston curled his lip into a cold smile, savoring the scene as his plan unfolded exactly as he'd hoped. Officer Michael Carter, the taller of the 2, stepped closer to Jessica, his voice dropping to a measured authoritative tone. "Ma'am, to clarify this incident, we need you to cooperate and step outside with us for a moment." Jessica stood unwavering, as if nothing unusual were happening. Her gaze flicked to the officer, gentle yet piercing, and she replied in a clear, calm voice, "I'm happy to cooperate. I trust this will be resolved quickly and fairly." Before she could move, Kevin Miller, the young salesperson who just finished her paperwork, stepped forward, his face pale, voice shaking but determined. "Wait, officers, I can vouch that Miss Barnes did nothing wrong. She's been right here beside me the whole time and never entered the VIP area, as Mr. Preston claimed." Kevin's plea was drowned out by the force of Richard Preston's booming voice. Seizing the moment, Richard cut him off, his eyes flashing as he addressed the officers. "This young man may be defending his client, but I trust my own eyes more. I saw her cross that barrier and touch the Rolls-Royce. The cameras will prove it. I suggest you not waste time with pointless denials." Richard's commanding words sliced through the showroom like a blade, piling more pressure on Jessica. The customers, eager to believe the powerful, wealthy man, leaned into his accusation. Even police officers bristled at his certainty. Officer James Anderson, shorter and more reserved, frowned at the brewing tension. He looked sympathetically at Kevin, then addressed Jessica firmly, seeking to de-escalate. "We understand you wish to defend her, but we must establish the facts. Miss Barnes, please step outside so we can discuss this more clearly." Jessica nodded without protest, her demeanor composed and polite. As she prepared to step away, Richard advanced one last step, his voice cruelly condescending. "I'm amazed you remain so calm, Miss Barnes, but I'd advise you to prepare a plausible explanation. This showroom is not a place for people of questionable character to do as they please." His public insult drew gasps. Some customers shook their heads in disgust at his arrogance, but Richard didn't care. His only goal was to humiliate Jessica before the crowd and prove he held all the power here. Jessica paused, turned to face Richard directly. Her eyes, now steely and unwavering, met his challenge as she replied coolly. "Mr. Preston, I won't argue with you here, but I believe the truth will come out soon enough. True power doesn't lie in baseless insults like yours." Even in her soft tone, her words resonated with many, who admired her composure under such intense pressure. Richard's expression darkened. Anger and frustration contorted his features as he clenched his fists around his champagne glass. The two officers then gently but firmly guided Jessica toward the showroom exit. She walked with dignity, unfazed, though dozens of whispered conversations and scrutinizing stares followed her through the glass doors. Inside, Kevin stood frozen, cheeks flushed with anger and frustration at his own powerlessness. Daniel Hartley remained statue still, avoiding every gaze, especially Richard's triumphant stare, confident he'd crushed the woman's spirit. As the doors closed behind Jessica, the showroom fell into a tense, breathless hush. Everyone waited, curious and anxious, to see what would happen next. Richard, still standing in his self-satisfied triumph, watched her retreating figure, unaware that the story was far from over and that the truth would soon emerge in a way no one expected. The glass doors slid shut behind Jessica, but the tension inside the showroom remained thick. Quiet murmurs rippled through the customers and the staff exchanged awkward glances. Richard stood with a triumphant expression, as if he'd just won a decisive battle. But the unusually prolonged silence made him uneasy. He shot a quick, uneasy look at Daniel Hartley, the store manager, who stood statue still, his face pale with worry. Just then, confident, measured footsteps echoed from the far end of the showroom. Every head turned toward the figure striding forward with authority. It was Marcus Donovan, Senior CEO of the entire Sterling Auto Dealership Network. Marcus rarely appeared in person at individual showrooms, so his sudden arrival sent a wave of surprise and confusion through the room. Marcus Donovan walked purposefully toward the group near the VIP display. His tailored black suit, perfectly knotted navy tie, and gleaming Patek Philippe watch all spoke of his status and authority. He scanned the showroom with a stern gaze that betrayed clear disappointment. When his eyes landed on Richard, Marcus frowned gravely and asked, "What's going on here, Daniel?" Marcus's voice wasn't loud, but its power made Daniel start as if awakened from a nightmare. Daniel stammered, mouth agape, unable to form a coherent response. He looked pleadingly at Richard, but Richard's face was as stunned as everyone else's. In Richard's mind raced the panicked question, why was Marcus here now? Before Daniel could speak, Richard forced a friendly smile and said, "Marcus, what a surprise to see you. We had a minor issue, but I've already taken care of it." Marcus didn't return the smile. Instead, he fixed Daniel with an unflinching stare. "I've just been informed by headquarters that a serious incident occurred here involving a customer. How do you explain the fact that the woman was just escorted out?" Daniel felt his heart stop. He tried to explain, voice trembling. "Mr. Donovan, we received a report from Mr. Preston that the woman crossed the barrier and touched the valuable Rolls-Royce Ghost. We were checking the security footage for verification. Marcus cut him off sharply. And you called the police before verifying the facts? Daniel fell silent, head bowed in shame. Marcus's gaze hardened further. Let me be clear. The woman you insulted and accused is Jessica Barnes, the secret CEO and largest owner of the Sterling Auto Network. She came here today as an ordinary customer to personally evaluate our service quality and staff conduct. Instantly, the showroom went deathly quiet. No one dared breathe as they absorbed a truth none had expected. Richard Preston's legs went weak, and his hands chilled with shock. His usual smug arrogance vanished, replaced by panic and fear. Daniel Hartley fared no better. His face drained of color as he looked at Marcus in desperation, swallowing the rising tide of regret. The revelation meant he'd committed a grievous error, one that could destroy his entire career. Marcus turned to Richard, voice icy. Mr. Preston, I truly can't believe someone of your standing would behave this way. You insulted and falsely accused the owner of this brand, in her own showroom. I don't know what you were thinking, but this is absolutely unacceptable. Richard opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. His defense dissolved in the face of this unassailable fact. He realized he'd lost all credibility and trust, not only with Marcus but with every customer, employee, and acquaintance present. Marcus then addressed Daniel, tone even sterner. And you, Daniel, I'm deeply disappointed. As a store manager, you should have upheld fairness, objectivity, and professional ethics. Instead, you bowed to pressure from money and status. Daniel kept his head down, unable to meet Marcus's disappointed gaze. He knew this moment marked the end of his tenure at Sterling Auto. Outside the showroom's glass doors, Jessica stood with the two officers, watching the scene unfold through the transparent walls. She let out a soft sigh, relief mingled with sadness, as she witnessed this raw display of human nature laid bare. Marcus glanced at Jessica and gave a subtle, silent nod of apology. Jessica returned his nod with a gentle, understanding smile. The showroom remained cloaked in heavy silence, as everyone realized this was the dramatic turning point, the moment when the truth upended the balance of power. No one could have guessed that the unassuming woman who'd been insulted and wrongfully accused was, in fact, the true authority and rightful owner of the Sterling Auto brand. The moment Marcus Donovan finished speaking, the showroom fell into a heavy, breathless silence, as if everyone were holding their breath amid a sudden storm. No one dared to speak. They merely cast furtive glances at Richard Preston, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disappointment. Richard, who until moments ago had been so powerful, arrogant, and self-assured, now looked shockingly small and vulnerable. He stood there like a stone statue, his body cold, his heart racing with panic and disorientation. Richard immediately felt the weight of dozens of scrutinizing gazes upon him, each one like an invisible blade slicing into the pride he once wore so proudly. He struggled to speak, his words trembling, his voice forced. Marcus, this is all just a misunderstanding. I really didn't know. I couldn't have imagined that woman was Miss Barnes. Marcus Donovan cut him off, his tone heavy with deep disappointment. Precisely because you didn't know, you had no right to act that way. Sterling Auto was built on the principle of respecting every customer, regardless of status, race, or appearance. You didn't just insult Miss Barnes, you insulted our core values. Marcus's stern words struck Richard like a dagger to the heart. He looked around desperately, searching for empathy or at least some sign of support, but found only cold, distant stares. Even the two companions who had stood by him stepped back, avoiding any association. Richard tried once more to defend himself, but his argument grew more incoherent. I acted thoughtlessly, but I meant no harm. It was just a small mistake. Marcus fixed him with an icy gaze, each word carrying the weight of judgment. A small mistake? You deliberately slandered Miss Barnes, called the police, and humiliated her in front of hundreds of customers. This isn't a small mistake, Richard. This is a matter of character and dignity. At that, Marcus gave a subtle nod. Two burly security officers immediately stepped forward, faces set in stern resolve. One spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Mr. Preston, please come with us immediately. By order of Sterling Auto's leadership, you are permanently banned from entering any Sterling Auto dealership nationwide." Richard spun around in shock. "Wait, what? Permanently banned? You can't do this to me." The officer remained unmoved, his voice resolute. "We're just carrying out our orders. Please cooperate to avoid any unnecessary trouble." Richard's body trembled with rage and helplessness. He turned to Marcus as if pleading for mercy, but Marcus looked away coldly. In that moment, Richard realized his power had utterly collapsed. All the wealth, influence, and social standing he had once taken for granted were meaningless beside the real authority embodied by Jessica Barnes and Marcus Donovan. With no other option, Richard allowed the officers to escort him out. His steps were heavy with shame and defeat. The showroom watched in stunned silence. Then whispers and soft chuckles began to spread, some mocking, some sympathetic, all clear enough to cut Richard to the core. As he passed through the glass doors, his heavy footsteps marked his exit from the realm he once ruled. Outside, the sky was bright and clear, but Richard felt only a cold emptiness. For the first time in his life, he recognized that he was a defeated man, brought low by his own arrogance and contempt for others. Once Richard disappeared beyond the door, the atmosphere inside the showroom shifted. Customers spoke freely, no longer held back by tension. Some shook their heads in disappointment. Others murmured approval of Marcus's decisive action. Daniel Hartley remained frozen, knowing full well that he too would face serious consequences for his grievous mistake. Marcus Donovan turned to the staff and customers, his voice now gentle and reassuring. "I sincerely apologize to all of you for this unfortunate incident. Sterling Auto is committed to respecting every customer, and I promise this will never happen again." His words lifted much of the lingering weight in the room. All eyes then turned to Jessica, who still stood calmly behind the glass, observing. The crowd's gaze was no longer one of suspicion or curiosity, but of deep respect for the woman who had shown that true power lies not in outward wealth or status, but in dignity, compassion, and unwavering resolve. Richard Preston left in utter disgrace, his illusion of power shattered, and with it, a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. The moment Richard's defeated form vanished through the glass doors, Jessica Barnes calmly stepped back into the showroom. The air still crackled with the aftermath of what had just happened, but now the looks aimed at her were no longer filled with suspicion. Instead, they were laced with clear respect. Jessica walked directly toward Daniel Hartley, who remained frozen in place behind his manager's desk, his eyes avoiding hers in desperate shame. For the first time in his many years on the job, Daniel felt the complete collapse of the confidence he'd painstakingly built up, brought down by one ill-advised decision made under the weight of power and wealth. Stopping in front of him, Jessica spoke in a soft but resolute voice, loud enough for everyone in the showroom to hear. "Mr. Hartley, I think now is the appropriate time for us to have a serious conversation about what just occurred." Daniel struggled to steady himself, but when he looked up into Jessica's steadfast, penetrating gaze, Whatever remained of his false pride shattered. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he managed a few words. I am truly sorry, Miss Barnes. I had no idea who you were. I acted irresponsibly." Jessica shook her head gently, her eyes both stern and tinged with sadness and disappointment. "Daniel, the issue here isn't that you didn't know who I was. The real problem is that you chose to put the interests of a wealthy customer above your professional ethics and the basic respect you owe to anyone who walks into this showroom." Her words cut deep into Daniel's conscience. He recognized that it wasn't ignorance but a lack of courage and self-respect that had led him here. Jessica continued, her tone growing firmer, with no hint of mercy. "You are the store manager, Daniel. You are the one responsible for ensuring fairness, objectivity, and respect for all customers. Yet, instead of upholding that duty, you readily accepted baseless accusations without even checking the security cameras or verifying the facts. You even called the police to handle a situation that never existed. Think about how you've harmed someone's honor and dignity merely based on their unassuming appearance." Her statement resonated through the showroom, and everyone stood silent, absorbing her words. Several junior staff lowered their heads in shame, regretting that they hadn't spoken up when it mattered most. Kevin Miller stood nearby, his eyes filled with remorse and admiration as he watched Jessica confront this injustice head-on. Daniel Hartley completely collapsed under Jessica's rebuke. His face drained of color, and his voice dwindled to broken whispers of contrition. "Miss Barnes, please believe me. I am truly remorseful." Jessica waited patiently, her gaze unsoftened. When Daniel finished, she spoke again in an even clearer, more powerful voice. "I believe you're sorry, Daniel, but your actions have consequences greater than personal regret. You've set a dangerous precedent of prejudice and discrimination right here at Sterling Auto. That runs counter to the core values we have always maintained." She paused, looking Daniel squarely in the eye as if to impart the full weight of her next words. "I cannot accept this, Daniel. I must place you on immediate suspension pending a full investigation. And you should prepare yourself. The consequences may be severe." Daniel froze at her declaration. He knew this could very well mark the end of the career he'd built almost his entire life. He drew in a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and nodded in resigned acceptance. "I understand, ma'am. I am fully prepared to take responsibility for my mistakes." Marcus Donovan stepped forward to stand beside Jessica. His voice was calm but unwavering as he sealed the decision. "Daniel, please hand over your managerial duties to the assistant manager. I will personally review your personnel file. Be ready to face the leadership team at the upcoming meeting." Daniel nodded again, hands shaking as he removed his manager's badge and placed it on the desk before Jessica, a final act of contrition. Turning away, he walked out, his departure watched by all with a mixture of sympathy and a sobering lesson about professional integrity. Jessica stood quietly, watching Daniel leave the position he once so proudly held, her heart heavy. She knew this was a harsh but essential lesson for the entire Sterling Auto team about respect, self-respect, and ethical responsibility. The showroom returned to silence, but this time it carried a weighty lesson that everyone would remember for a long time. Jessica had turned the most difficult moment into an opportunity to reinforce the absolute importance of ethical values at Sterling Auto, and today, that lesson had been indelibly engraved in every witness. The moment Daniel's retreating figure disappeared from view, a thoughtful, hushed atmosphere settled over the entire showroom. The remaining staff exchanged silent glances, as if each were questioning their own sense of responsibility and courage. In that quiet space, Jessica Barnes turned and looked toward Kevin Miller, the young salesperson standing with his head bowed in regret. Kevin was still flushed with shame for not being stronger in defending Jessica against Richard Preston's attack and Daniel Hartley's pressure. He looked up at her, embarrassment and self-reproach coloring his face. He parted his lips to speak, but his voice cracked under the weight of his emotions. "Miss Barnes, I'm truly sorry. I should have been braver, should have done more to protect you from those false accusations." Jessica stepped closer, her gaze gentle and full of understanding. "Kevin, you need not blame yourself so harshly. I know you tried to defend me under very difficult circumstances. What matters most is that you didn't remain completely silent." Kevin lifted his eyes, hope flickering as he absorbed her encouragement, though sadness still lingered. "But, ma'am, I still feel I lacked the courage, lacked the strength to do what was right when it mattered most. My fear made me hesitate." Jessica gave him a small, reassuring smile and laid a hand on his shoulder. Her tone was steady, compassionate, and yet firm. "Kevin, understand this. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're most afraid. Today, you stepped forward and defended me with every ounce of sincerity you had. That was the first step toward true bravery." Kevin listened intently, feeling his heart swell with renewed resolve. Jessica's eyes grew distant, as though recalling her own past. "I once stood where you are now, Kevin. Early in my career, I too faced prejudice, injustice, and the pressure of those with wealth and power over me. Back then, I hesitated, and I paid a steep price for my silence. But I learned that remaining silent in the face of injustice is complicity." She paused, meeting Kevin's eyes with unwavering intensity, her voice rising with inspiration. "From the day I chose not to stay silent, every time I confronted wrongdoing, I reminded myself I was fighting, not just for myself but for those who lacked the courage to speak up. Those experiences shaped me into who I am today." Kevin felt awakened by her words. He realized he had always chosen the safe path, avoiding conflict, but today taught him the real value of courage. He nodded firmly, determination shining in his eyes, his voice clear and confident. "I understand, Miss Barnes. From now on, I will never stay silent in the face of injustice or discrimination. I will always speak up, even when the cost is high." Jessica squeezed his shoulder affectionately, pride warming her smile, like a teacher watching her student take a vital step forward. "I believe you will, Kevin. Remember, when you speak out for what's right, you not only grow stronger yourself, you empower those around you. Above all, I trust in your sincerity and passion." The other staff members gradually stepped closer, their expressions moved and respectful. In that instant, the showroom's atmosphere transformed, from suffocating tension to a warm, human solidarity. Kevin looked around and felt the silent support of his colleagues. He drew a deep breath and, with firm conviction, addressed Jessica and everyone present. "I promise you, and all of you, I will never let fear hold me back again. I will stand up, courageously defend the values we all share." His words were met with nods of agreement and looks of genuine respect. Jessica's heart lightened, knowing that this difficult moment had become a powerful lesson for the entire Sterling Auto team about the importance of courage, ethical responsibility, and unity. In that moment, Jessica took in the showroom around her and felt certain that, from today forward, Sterling Auto would be known not only for its business success, but also for upholding the highest moral values, where every employee understands their duty to build a fair, humane, and respectful workplace. In the moment, Kevin's determined words still echoed through the showroom. Jessica swept her gaze around the room. She could feel, with absolute clarity, that every employee was undergoing a powerful awakening of responsibility and courage. But she also knew that words of encouragement alone wouldn't suffice. Today's incident was more than a personal crisis. It was a symptom of a much larger issue, a problem with Sterling Auto's workplace culture and ethical awareness. Jessica gave a slight nod, then walked slowly to the center of the room, positioning herself so everyone could see and hear her clearly. Her eyes were at once stern and sincere as she drew in a deep breath and began, "Everyone, today we witnessed a deeply regrettable event. It wasn't just about one individual. It was a clear sign that we need to reevaluate how we work together and interact here at Sterling Auto." Her words rippled across the silent room. Every employee leaned in to listen as she continued with conviction. Today's incident is the starkest example of what happens when unconscious biases and the invisible pressures of power and money are allowed to override the fairness and basic respect every person deserves. She paused, softening her gaze as she made eye contact with each person in turn, sending her message to every heart. It's time for change, not just in our policies but in our attitudes, our awareness, and our actions as individuals. From this moment on, anyone who walks through our doors, regardless of wealth, appearance, or background, must be treated with absolute respect. This isn't merely a directive. It's a core value woven into the very DNA of our brand. Staff exchanged looks of emotion and agreement. They understood that this was a turning point, a moment marking Sterling Auto's growth not only in business, but in ethics and social responsibility. Jessica's voice rang out even more clearly. "As of tomorrow, we will launch a comprehensive cultural and personnel overhaul across every Sterling Auto branch nationwide. I will ask our executive team to conduct in-depth training, emphasizing ethical awareness, diversity, and the courage to speak up for what's right." She turned to Marcus Donovan, who stood firmly beside her in solidarity, and continued, "Marcus and I will personally oversee these changes to ensure they are carried out thoroughly and earnestly. We will also establish regular audits and evaluations to identify and address any instances of discrimination or injustice the moment they arise." Glancing around the room once more, her tone softened with genuine warmth. "But I need every one of you to understand that neither Marcus nor I can do this alone. Each of us is responsible for making Sterling Auto a place where everyone feels respected, heard, and protected." She paused, her eyes resting on Kevin, then added, "And I want us all to learn from Kevin. Though he's not perfect, his courage to step out of his comfort zone and speak up for what's right is exactly the foundation we need for building a fair, humane culture." Kevin felt a surge of pride despite his earlier embarrassment. Then, as if on cue, tentative applause began among the staff, soon swelling into enthusiastic, heartfelt applause that filled the showroom with a sense of unity and resolve. Marcus Donovan stepped forward, his voice firm and supportive. "I fully agree with Jessica. Now is the time for decisive action. No tolerance for any behavior that contradicts the values we are committed to building at Sterling Auto." He turned back to Jessica and nodded in resolute partnership. "I will do everything in my power to ensure Sterling Auto becomes an industry exemplar, not only in business success but in ethics and social responsibility." Jessica smiled gratefully, then addressed everyone one final time, her voice charged with inspiration. "Let's move forward together in this transformation. I believe Sterling Auto will not only grow stronger, but will become a place we can all be proud to work, a place where each of us can hold our heads high and say confidently, "I am part of Sterling Auto." Her words reverberated through the showroom, igniting a new wave of determination. Every employee understood that from today on, Sterling Auto would never be the same. It would stand as a brand defined by respect, fairness, and humanity, built by the collective courage and ethical responsibility of every single person here. Just one day after Jessica's powerful, inspiring address at the Sterling Auto showroom, the story quickly broke beyond the dealership's doors and went viral across media and social platforms. When Jessica woke up the next morning, her phone was flooded with messages and alerts. From news outlets and TV stations to social media channels, and even prominent business leaders across America. On major social platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, the hashtag number Sterling Auto Justice trended almost instantly, racking up hundreds of thousands of interactions, shares, and comments within hours. Respected outlets such as CNN and MSNBC, along with leading newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post, all ran in-depth coverage, examining the incident through lenses of racial bias, workplace injustice, and the nature of real power in modern business. Thousands of articles, videos, podcasts, and live streams dissected every angle of the story. One clip, in particular, capturing Jessica's confrontation with Richard and Daniel in the showroom, and her unforgettable line, became the centerpiece of the conversation. "You think I don't belong here. I own this entire showroom you're standing in." That brief yet potent declaration became a rallying cry for true authority. Not one based on appearances, money, or title, but on dignity, integrity, and moral courage. Social media users quoted it widely, pairing it with personal accounts of injustices and discrimination they'd faced in their own lives. In stark contrast to the widespread support for Jessica, Richard Preston found himself pilloried by public opinion. Stories of his racist behavior, arrogance, and abuse of power were shared and reshared everywhere. In just 24 hours, Richard's reputation lay in ruins. Clients, business partners, and even close friends publicly severed ties. On major talk shows, experts, social activists, and business leaders held Jessica's story up as a classic case study of persistent, unconscious biases and discrimination in today's workplace. In a special CNN interview, one prominent business executive remarked, "Jessica Barnes's stand at Sterling Auto isn't an isolated incident. It's a clear demonstration that real power doesn't come from flashy displays. It comes from character, self-respect, and social responsibility. Any company that fails to understand this is destined to fail." Meanwhile, Daniel Hartley, the showroom manager who'd bungled the situation, became the object of harsh criticism online. Images of him standing awkwardly at a loss as Jessica challenged him circulated widely as an emblem of cowardice and ethical failure. By morning, his career was effectively over, and he faced unavoidable consequences for his actions. Jessica watched all of this unfold with a mix of emotions. She felt no joy at Richard's or Daniel's downfall, but she recognized that the story had awakened countless people to the need for courage in speaking out against injustice. Before long, she began receiving letters, emails, and messages from all over the country, from ordinary citizens and young students to renowned leaders, thanking her for her bravery and the profound message she'd delivered. One letter especially touched her. It was from a young intern named Emily at a large corporation. Emily wrote, "Dear Ms. Barnes, your story gave me the strength to stand up against the injustices I've witnessed in my workplace. I was once too afraid to speak up, but now I won't stay silent. I promise you, I will always defend what's right, just as you did." Those heartfelt words moved Jessica deeply. She realized that sparking courage and a commitment to justice in others was the greatest victory of all. That very day, Jessica announced a public press conference at Sterling Auto's headquarters to formally roll out the company's new policies. At the podium, she spoke with unwavering sincerity. At Sterling Auto, we are committed not only to correcting our mistakes, but to becoming a model for a fair, discrimination-free workplace. I hope our story serves as a powerful reminder to every business. True power does not lie in dominating others, but in upholding fairness and human dignity for all. Her speech was shared far and wide, reinforcing the core message she intended to convey. In the days that followed, Sterling Auto received overwhelming support and respect from the community, from partners, and from new customers, who now saw the brand as a symbol of equality and principled leadership. Before long, Jessica's and Sterling Auto's story transcended a mere incident, becoming a powerful lesson, a catalyst for deeper, positive change across society. Jessica understood that her proud declaration had resonated far beyond any material ownership. It stood as the strongest proof of the true value of human dignity in the face of injustice. Just one day after Jessica's powerful, inspiring speech at the Sterling Auto showroom, the story had spread nationwide, and Sterling Auto itself entered an unprecedented period of deep reform in its history. The recent upheaval served as a wake-up call for the entire company, forcing every individual to reassess not only their role at work, but also their ethical responsibility to society. With her trademark decisiveness, Jessica led the reform effort with clear, systematic measures. She convened all staff meetings at every Sterling Auto dealership across the country to listen directly to employees' concerns, aspirations, and challenges. She rolled out new policies on recruitment, training, and company culture, aimed not only at eradicating any trace of injustice, but also at creating a positive, fair, respectful, and humane workplace environment. The early days of the overhaul were far from easy. Some longtime employees clung to their old biases and resisted the profound changes Jessica proposed, but she refused to be discouraged or compromise. Patiently, she engaged each naysayer in dialogue, using her sincerity, compassion, and unwavering resolve to win them over. In every meeting, she made this point crystal clear. We are changing not because of external pressure, but because of our own self-respect and our duty to each other and to the community. Gradually, attitudes and mindsets at Sterling Auto began to shift positively. Special training programs emphasizing ethical awareness, diversity, and social responsibility became regular events. Jessica herself took part in many of these sessions, sharing her personal stories and experiences, touching employees deeply and inspiring them to grow. Before long, Sterling Auto was no longer just a successful auto retailer. It had become a shining example of a healthy, equitable workplace culture. Customers noticed the difference too, the genuine warmth and fairness in the way they were greeted, advised, and served. Many told friends they felt proud to shop at a place that valued human dignity above profit. As Sterling Auto earned widespread community support, competitors in the industry took note of the importance of building a culture based on respect and equality. Some companies began hosting roundtables and even invited Jessica to speak and share her experience. She quickly became a sought-after speaker at leadership, corporate culture, and social responsibility conferences. What Jessica achieved at Sterling Auto sparked a wave of reform across the automotive industry and the broader business world in America. Meanwhile, Richard Preston and Daniel Hartley, the story's antagonists, became living testaments to the consequences of letting prejudice and corrupted power prevail. Richard, permanently banned from Sterling Auto, saw his reputation and business relationships crumble, forcing him to withdraw from the very projects he once took pride in. Daniel faced strict disciplinary action and ultimately resigned in profound regret, carrying with him a painful lesson about the inviolable value of professional ethics. Jessica felt no satisfaction in their downfall. Instead, she used Richard's and Daniel's stories as cautionary tales for her team, illustrating the dire consequences of allowing bias and the lust for power to override fundamental moral values. In every conversation, she emphasized, we should never take pleasure in another's failure, but we must learn from those mistakes so we never repeat them. Over time, Sterling Auto emerged as a brand respected and admired nationwide, not just for its business success but for its ethical principles. Universities, social organizations, and even political leaders regularly cited Jessica's and Sterling Auto's story as a prime example for teaching leadership, social responsibility, and the true power of justice. Today, Jessica Barnes is not only a successful CEO but also an inspirational icon, a model leader whom many young people and business executives across America aspire to emulate. She has received numerous prestigious awards for social responsibility and is frequently invited to speak at major human rights, equality, and ethical leadership conferences. But for Jessica, the greatest reward is the profound positive shift in people's minds. The countless letters and stories of individuals standing up against injustice after hearing her story stand as undeniable proof that her actions were not just right, but profoundly meaningful. When Jessica looks back at the Sterling Auto showroom today, she sees it transformed from the day she first walked in. She knows that true leadership power does not lie in instilling fear or commanding obedience, but in inspiring people to join together in upholding values of humanity, ethics, and fairness. That, above all, is the greatest lesson Jessica hopes everyone will remember from that day: the real worth of human dignity, self-respect, and the genuine strength of justice in our lives. Don't forget to like this video, share this story with friends and family, and subscribe for more meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.